This is the Doing Scary Things podcast. I'm Katie. I'm a veteran photographer, a serial entrepreneur, an aspiring author, and a relentless optimist. I'm a slow-talking, deep thinker from the Appalachian Mountains.
I'm Anna. I'm a prodigal musician, an accidental psychotherapist, and I'm living life mostly by experiment and endless curiosity. I'm a redheaded speed talker from a Midwestern farm town.
The purpose of this podcast is to talk to people who are doing some pretty scary things in their life about what it takes for them to push past fear and keep themselves going every day.
We'll also unpack the vulnerable things we're pursuing in our own lives and hopefully offer encouragement to you wherever you are on your journey.
Man, that was brilliant.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Doing Scary Things podcast. We are so glad you're here. We're so glad to be here with you. We hope everyone has had a great start to the new year, and we have some really big things planned that we think you're going to love. Today, we're really excited to share a really fun and really inspiring interview we had recently with author and former TED Talk speaker, Hannah Brencher. We hope you enjoy. Thank you so much for joining us today. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I am Hannah, and I am a writer and an author of 2 books. And I also run an organization called More Love Letters. We are a global organization that uses the power behind social media to write and mail letters to strangers in need all over the world. So I do a lot of different things. I wear a lot of hats, but I've had a beautiful little journey. I never know how to describe it to people. They're like, what do you do? And I'm like, What don't I do? What do I not do?
That was a great nutshell.
Yeah. Thank you.
There's probably so many roles within that.
It's only taken like 5 years to perfect that.
And all those are so huge. So you have 2 published books. Mm-hmm. How did that come about? Did you always know you wanted to be a writer? Did you set out to write a book? How did that start?
Yeah, I definitely, 6-year-old Hannah wanted to write books more than anything. My grandmother told me that I would become an author, that I would see my name in bookstores one day. And when somebody tells you that and you're 6 years old, you just believe them. You're like, okay, that's what I'll do. And I don't think it was until I got to college that it hit me that wasn't the most realistic thing in the world or the most practical thing in the world, that it could absolutely happen. But how was my question, And so I think that it didn't really hit me. And I don't even think until after I had written the first book and was working on the second book did I ever feel like I was like, oh, I'm an author. I can say that I'm an author. For some reason, we just don't touch that word, or we dance around that word in the same way that we dance around this idea of being a writer, of what does that mean? Does that mean that I'm living in my parents' basement and writing the next Harry Potter while eating ramen? It's crazy to me because I feel like people don't know the benchmarks for being a writer and being an author in the way that I feel like you could say, well, I'm a photographer, or I'm an accountant. So it's just been, as good as I've been able to introduce myself as an author, that took a long time for me to be able to be yeah, I'm an author. I do this thing. I write books.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting you use the word benchmarks. Was there a certain benchmark that you hit, or a certain measurable way that you felt okay, now it's okay for me to assume that role or to assume that identity?
I think that it was really just an insecurity inside of myself. I think I was afraid to call myself an author because what if somebody came back and was what classifies you? What gives you the right to have that title? I think that the second you write a book or you write a poem or you write a short story, you're an author. Just in the same way that when you sit down to write and you make that the habit, more often than not, I think you're a writer. But for some reason it felt that's a role that I can't say that I do, because then what if I say that and I'm not good at it, I think that was really the barrier. It's what if I am not good at the thing that I love more than anything in this world? That's scary. Talk about doing scary things.
Yeah.
Actually, that is what we're talking about.
I feel that. And I think that's something a lot of people struggle with. I don't know if that's part of like imposter syndrome or what that is, but I know I've said that to people on multiple occasions. If you're doing this every day, then that's part of you. You know, you've earned that title, but I know that's such a tricky thing.
I like that distinction that you don't have to be a good author to be an author. Like being awesome at it is not requisite. At least not at the beginning.
Yeah, you don't have to be a good lawyer to be a lawyer. You don't have to be a good photographer. Right. I mean, some people just literally show up with a camera and they're like, yeah, my cousin needed somebody to take pictures at their wedding. I'm a photographer now,
Right. Don't I know?
I wish I had the boldness and confidence of some other people.
Right. Yeah. I guess that goes both ways. Yeah. I guess some people aren't afraid. But I think that's really inspiring and interesting to hear you say that even after your first book is out, you're not sure if you can call yourself a writer. I hope people hear that and think, okay, then that gives me a little courage. I can do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Since you turned that corner and you now do have that confidence and do identify yourself that way, has anyone ever challenged you on it?
I don't think... No, I don't. I haven't ever had like an interaction where somebody's like, that's not what you are. But yeah, you will always get some kind of pushback, or you will make the mistake of in an incredibly low moment reading the 1-star reviews on Amazon. And those are always really fun. So it will always be like, you're not always going to be somebody's cup of tea. Like you could... I always say it's like you could make the sweetest peaches in the world and there's still going to be somebody who doesn't like peaches. And that's just what it is, So I think you have to have some kind of like internal confidence. Like you need to know like that's why you're here and that's why you're doing the thing. And that if you didn't do it tomorrow, like nobody else's heart would be broken, but your own heart would be broken. And that should be enough.
Yeah.
That counts.
Oh my goodness. That's so inspiring.
Yeah.
I can't believe you have any 1-star reviews.
Yeah.
What in the world?
Yeah. No, they're there. They're for sure there.
What?
I mean, sometimes, like, if I go deep down the rabbit hole, which is rarely, I don't usually allow myself to do this, but I don't know why. Is this something, though, that when you're already feeling pretty crappy about yourself, you just decide to, like, bludgeon yourself? You're like, yeah, let me go on Amazon. That's going to make me feel better. And it's just everybody gets bad reviews, and you have to either know that that person is constantly giving negative reviews, or I think a lot of the 1-star reviews, there's not many of them, but they come from somebody thinking a book is going to be about this, and it ends up being about something entirely different, Like, for instance, I mean, I just read a book this past weekend, and I was so, like, this is not what I thought the book was going to be at all. Like, I thought it was going to be a sweet little love story, and it ended up being, like, 50 Shades of Grey. Like, it was wild. And I did go on Amazon just to look at the reviews, and the 1-star reviews were saying that, like, this is not the book that I picked up to read. Like, I didn't think that it was going to be this way. And so, that's its own vein of people that are adamant about giving 1-star reviews on Amazon.
Yeah.
Can you not regroup and go, oh, okay, well, now that I know what it is and what it isn't, how can I consider that in the context of what it actually is,
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's something to be said for that. Oh, it's misleading or it's confusing or something, so you really had a reason to think it was something else.
Isn't that at least 2 stars, Like,
yeah.
1 star for writing the book.
Yeah. Right? Come on.
But
1.5 at least.
Yeah, like, these peaches are terrible pickles. Like, well, that's because they're peaches.
But I think that's a great point of what you were saying of, like, it's not going to be for everybody. You can't please everybody. And that's so,
right.
I mean, we've all heard that. It's so easy to say, but I think reminding yourself in that moment probably would hold a lot of value.
Yeah.
We want to be everything to everyone, right? Like, we're like, yeah, I want everyone to like me. Like,
yeah.
They say that in your 30s, you let that go. So I'm, like, waiting for the day where I'm like, I'm done.
Yes.
I do it a lot less than I used to,
okay.
For sure.
To me, reading the 1-star review when you're already having, like, a low day, to me, that's like, okay, I feel like it's really bad. I just want to know exactly how bad it is. Like, I want to know where the bottom actually is, because then I at least know, and I can go from there.
Then I go and I read other people's 1-star reviews, thinking maybe that will make me feel better if so-and-so gets 1-star reviews too. And it doesn't. There's something
Really?
about, yeah, it doesn't. It's like, it only affirms to me that A, people on the internet are vicious.
Yeah.
But B, just like, there's something about criticism that like is directed at you, that like, it doesn't matter who else is getting criticism. That was for you, and that hurts more. And I mean, like, I've definitely gotten thicker skin across the years. Like, I used to get emails that would like crush me, of like, one person went so far as to create a blog about it was called Hannah Brencher Sucks. And like, every time that I would blog, they would blog too about why my blog was so bad. Like, and they would then send me anonymous emails to get me to open up this blog. It was like, I wanted to be like, do you have a job? Like, what are you adding to this world? You know, like, I would get those, and I don't get them that often, but like, when you get them though, like, it hurts still. Like, it just does.
If any of our listeners are doing that to anyone, please go back and listen to our episode about encouraging people, because that's not encouraging. That is the opposite of encouraging. That is mind-blowing
Also,
that someone would put forth all that effort.
You're a little psychotic. I'm just going to call it
what it is. And I also am just like, if you're going to do that, then like, don't make it anonymous. Like, let's talk about it. Because like, one girl sent me an email once, and she wasn't anonymous in it. Like, it was her email address, and it was this whole long email about how she hates me and what she hates about me. And I responded back to her, and I just was like, hey, I just have to let you know, like, you are a fantastic writer. Like, you're such a good writer. Because it was a beautiful email. It was about how awful I am, but like, it was well written. And I just said to her, like, girl, you need to take this gift somewhere else, because like, you're wasting it in this area. Like, but kudos, because that was a great email. Gosh. And she ended up emailing me back, and like, we're friends now. Like, we're not best friends, but like, she'll email me all the time, like, with like news in her life and like things that are going on. And like, I just think that you have to at some point be like, okay, like, there are going to be some people who are angry, and some people that are sitting on the caps lock button, like, for everything that they type. And like, how do I take their lemons and like make my own personal lemonade, you know?
That's a magical example of not taking it personally. Like, it's so amazing that you could look through all of that and go, okay, you're a person who's A, gifted, B, wasting your gift on hatred, and C, you're worth encouraging. All that hatred is probably not really about you anyway.
Like, when I responded to her, she came back to me and was like, I don't hate you at all. Like, I don't hate you at all. But a bunch of my friends like talk about you like they're like your best friend, like you're in the room with us. And I thought if I sent you this email, you would never read it, nor would you respond, and I would be right. And I mean, like, I had responded within the hour. I was like, hey, I think you're a really talented writer. Like,
wow.
Sucks that I'm an awful person. And like,
you passed the test.
That's incredible.
So it is interesting, though, that people feel like, and this is what blows my mind about the internet, is that, like, people feel like the person's not really there behind the screen. So you can say whatever you want to say. And it's like, she sent that email because she thought I wouldn't read it. So, like, whatever anger she was feeling in her own life, she turned me into the scapegoat for it.
Yeah.
And that, like, terrifies me, though, because, I mean, I see comments left on social media for people, and I want to be like, you need your mom to, like, wipe your mouth out with soap, because this is disgusting that you would say this publicly. And, like, I think there's something about the screens that make us feel like, well, that person's not really real. That person's feelings aren't valid. Like, I can say whatever I want because I'm behind this layer of protection.
Right.
We're all brave when we're anonymous or sort of separated that way. And it's such a weird dynamic that we're so much more connected, sort of, but also we have that weird kind of power of anonymity to be kind of extra nasty to each other, you know? weird combination.
Leaving 1-star reviews.
What I keep thinking about is, you can't look to other people for validation. And that's a hard one for certain personalities. It's a hard one for mine. And so it's like, if you're looking for that on the internet, you're not going to find that. It's like what you're talking about is the next step of that, even. No matter what people say to me, no matter what people say about me, I have to be okay with myself.
Totally.
And that's a hard one. It's a hard one when you're doing work that it's like so important to you and you're proud of, but it's like you're not sure if you're allowed to be proud of it, right?
Yeah.
Or does it hold value?
Like, my job exists because of the internet. And so that's, like, really weird, where it's, like, this tension between, it doesn't matter if you don't like me, but really it kind of does matter if you do like me, because you have to buy my books. And, like, it's weird. It's a weird tension. But I think it's crazy how, like, because we used to get online because we really wanted to connect with one another. And I feel more and more that we get online because we want validation, because we want somebody to see us and, like, say, you're enough, or you're beautiful, or you look great today, that selfie, your face, all these things. And It's like, was it ever meant to be for that? I don't think so. But as it pulls us away from each other, there's less and less, like, real human face-to-face affirmation. So, I don't know. It's a crazy world.
Yeah, it's like the whole world in which someone would send you an email thinking you'll never read it or take it personally at all. What is that world? We live in that world.
Yeah, that's us. We live there.
Yeah. It matters if people like you. Self-promotion is like this weird, awkward thing, but it also is sort of everything now, because you are your brand, you are your project. It's kind of built in that people have to kind of like you to like what you're doing or to care about your stuff. And you got to show your face and you got to be yourself in front of everyone. And you being yourself is kind of really tied into whatever it is that you're putting into the world. Maybe more than ever. I don't know. Maybe not, but it feels that way to me as someone who's kind of uncomfortable with self-promotion.
Totally. There are days where you just want to, like, get rid of all of the internet, and you're like, oh, wait, I can't. They, like, won't let me write books anymore if I do that. So we have to find a way to work around it and make it happen and not let my worth reside on what people say or don't say about me.
Right.
Totally. Well, let's back up a little. I heard a rumor that this one time you, like, moved across the country, kind of.
Yeah.
So can you tell us how you ended up in Atlanta?
The internet. I knew somebody from Twitter, and I deemed that to be a worthwhile reason to pack up my life and move to Atlanta. It wasn't like a romance or anything. It was just a friendship. But I don't know. I think that, like, I just wanted to do something impressive, really. Like, I had already done some impressive things, and I think you can get addicted to what it feels like to be seen by other people and applauded. And so I thought, okay, well, what is the thing that I do after I write this book? Well, I guess I have to move across the country, because that's really brave. And I did. And I think I thought it was going to be like an episode of Friends, and, like, it was going to be done in 20 minutes and it was going to be seamless. And it was anything but. It was hard. It was very hard.
None of those.
No, that's a great point, though.
Where'd you move from?
I moved from Connecticut to Atlanta. So
that's a big difference.
The North versus the South. It's a very big cultural shock.
So what was that process like? Tell us a little bit about the reality of that, because that does seem very brave.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, I mean, I think I had to, like, I, like, look back and I'm like, what was that? Like, what was going on? Because I think I probably thought it was going to be a phase. My parents probably thought it was going to be a phase. Like, oh, she just needs to move to get it out of her system. You know, I don't think I ever thought, like, oh, I'm going to plant roots in Atlanta and then I'm going to, like, live in Atlanta and get married in Atlanta. Like, that could have never been on my radar. Like, but it would be a complete lie to say that it was easy or that it was romantic. It was messy and it was hard, and it was, I had to, like, make a decision at some point of, like, am I gonna stay or am I gonna leave? Because at any time I can go back home. I can go right back where I started. And there's nothing wrong with that place. But I think that I moved to Atlanta, like the deeper underlying reason I moved to Atlanta is because I wanted to build a life for myself, and I wanted it to be my own. I didn't want it to be a life that my parents built for me, or like a life that like someone else built for me. Like, I wanted to prove that I could do it on my own, and I wanted to be able to choose what I wanted to choose. And it was a lot of trial and error, and I would say that for like the first 6 months I resisted it completely. It was kind of like the second things got hard in Atlanta, I was surprised to hear the words coming out of my mouth of how much, Atlanta's great, but like where I come from, like that's better. Like that's where I'm waiting to go back to. And I just think it's so funny the way we romanticize the things that we willingly left behind. I had to reach a point where I was like, okay, like I have to learn to be where my feet are. I need to plant myself. I need to get to know these girls. I need to show up to my office space and not isolate myself and make this place my home. And if after I do all of these things, it still is not clicking, I have permission to go back. But like, I at least need to stop being a brat and like put my everything towards this. And when I stopped being a brat, like, I think that's when I started to see all the things that, like, Atlanta had for me and the reason that I moved here to begin with. I couldn't see any of that if I was constantly feeling like I was supposed to be somewhere else.
I love that.
Yeah, you gotta, like, wholeheartedly go for it to know for sure.
Yeah, and that's so freaking hard.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's just so many lessons in what you just said, even so many metaphors were going through my head, because it's like probably when you decided, yeah, I know somebody from Twitter, of course it's going to be great and I'm going to move there. It's like you hadn't gotten to the hard part yet, right? You probably couldn't have even imagined it. It's almost like you have to decide what you're made of. Am I going to fight? Am I going to go back where I came from? That's true of all of us in one way or another. We're putting out this work and people may hate it, but we have to like decide, are we going to stay here, see it through and at least try? Or are we just, oh, you don't like it? Okay, I'm going to quit now. I'm going to just go back and not open my mouth again.
Yeah. Like, am I going to stay? I think like stay in the fight for it, whatever that is. And it's easy when it's leading up to something, when it's the launch of something, when it's like the nerves are out there on the table and it's like, it was like that surreal moment of like, okay, like I'm sitting in this bedroom and my bags are unpacked and I've bought all the IKEA furniture and it's all assembled at this point. And like, now what? Like, now what do I do when the momentum slows down? Because it will. And that's when you have to make the decision. And that's where it's like, I want to take like people that like love a certain craft, whether that is writing, whether that's a podcast, whatever that is, and be like, no, like we have to learn to be consistent. We need to learn to create content even when it doesn't get the applause we thought it was going to get. Or, like I'm reminding myself of this today as like I'm posting like holiday gift guides. And it's like, I love to create these gift guides and I've made it a tradition to create these gift guides, but they don't usually get a lot of comments and a lot of feedback. And I have to be okay with that, to be like, but like you started this thing, so finish this thing and keep doing this thing. And like, that's where we stop too early. Like we stop the second it gets hard or the second it feels like no one's watching. And if it's not because you love it so much that you can't help but do it, like get out of the game. You have to leave.
Yeah.
Stop.
I recently heard someone say, I'm trying to remember who, but I recently heard someone say, act based on who you are, not how you feel. And I want to extend that to sort of act based on who you are and why you're here.
Yeah.
And not just how you feel. Because sometimes it'll feel great, but sometimes it doesn't feel great. And I think that's where your whole idea of discipline comes in. If there's a foundation for that discipline, like this is who I am, this is what I'm meant to do, then yeah, it makes the discipline kind of a worthy pursuit, because that can be really hard. And I think people increasingly tend to go, well, if it's not making me happy, then I should not do it. And it's like, oh, that's kind of a loaded statement.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I've had to learn to stop listening to my feelings. Some of those feelings are valid and some of those need to be taken into account, but there's so many of them that it's like, this is just a feeling. Like, ride it out, get to the end of it, and another feeling is going to show up. And it's like, the amount of us, though, that are like, oh, I felt this, and so I have to go and make a split-second decision right now. And it's like, hold off, like, put the feeling in the jar for the day, and, like, come back to it tomorrow. Like, would you do the same thing, or would you look at it differently?
Amen. Amen.
No,
amen.
that's amazing. That's actually what I was going to ask you about, because you do, you write a lot about discipline, I feel like, on your social media accounts. And I'm sure as a writer, that has to be a huge part of your life. Can you tell us a little bit about the role that plays? And I'm also curious to hear more about why Hallmark got it wrong with portraying their writers recently.
Oh, Hallmark. What don't they get wrong? What don't they get wrong? Yeah, so it's interesting because it wasn't until, like, I started to get into the actual discipline side of writing do I think I felt like it clicked and I became passionate about writing. Because I never thought that I would even teach writing courses. I was like, no, because I had this stereotype in my mind that the people that teach writing courses, like, also wear fairy wings and, like, just, how does this make you feel? And, like, the way that we approach writing, and, like, we're waiting on inspiration, like it's Santa and he's coming down the chimney at some point. And it's like, I had to learn that you can actually, like, train yourself to be creative. You can train yourself to create, and, like, you can create on commands. Like, I no longer believe in writer's block. Like, I definitely think there are droughts and there are times where you're not writing the best words that you've got inside of you. But, like, you can sit down at any time in the day and you can write, and there are no excuses for why you can't do that, you know? And so when I became a more disciplined person, did I actually start teaching writing courses? Because I realized writing was just about discipline. It's about sitting down and it's doing the thing every single day. And I mean, I have been sitting down nearly every single day for the last, 5 years, like however long it was before I wrote my first book. And I can tell you there is never a day that I am like, yes, I can't wait to sit down and write today. Like, no, that never, ever happens. Like, I'll definitely get these spurts or these moments where I'm like, oh, it'd be so great later to be sitting and writing this, but that never happens. It's like, I have to write in the morning or I will not write at all. And I have to force myself to sit there, and I just need to write a bunch of crappy words until the right ones show up. And I think that's why, like, a lot of people say they want to be writers, but no one wants to write. And it's like, well, that would be the extra layer. I'm not just going to say that, like, oh, if you write, then you're a writer. But I think part of that is true. But I also think it's like, writers can't help but write. Like, they can't help but tap into this thing inside of them that constantly feels like, when I do this thing, I am at my best. I am who I'm most meant to be. And that's how I feel when I write. But I never actually want to get to that point of sitting in the chair and doing it. Hallmark. Oh, I mean, I was watching some movie the other day. It was called, like, Reunited at Christmas. And, she was a writer in the story, and she, like, goes to Christmas vacation and she's like, I have to write this book, but, like, I've got no inspiration. And they keep showing her, like, at the table for, like, increments of 2 minutes at a time. And she's just like, ugh, I have nothing to say. It's like as if, well, when the man shows up, like, then I will have something to say. And, like, it's annoying. If you watch those things, you're like, wait, every single girl in these movies is like a workaholic that has to go back to the hometown to find the man and then stay back for the man. And, like, it's just, we could go for days on it.
The man fixes everything.
And there's usually a dog.
There's always a dog. And always, the dad is always a widow. He's always a widow. And
You're right.
Always hooks up with someone in the town before the end of the movie. Like, oh, that's the mail lady that's been delivering the mail for 39 years, and she's got a really sweet smile. And then they end up getting married. Always happens.
So what's your issue with all this? No, sounds amazing.
Actually, there's nothing wrong with the widows finding the right people. But it was like the end of the movie, and she's just like, all of a sudden, in the span of, like, a day, she's written the book. It's like A Christmas, a Miracle, as she calls it. Like, really crappy 1-star Amazon review book. But, like, I want to be like, no, this is why people want to be writers, is because they think it's no work at all.
Yeah.
It's tragic. Those Hallmark writers. That's probably how long it took them to write the movie. It was 5 hours, but...
Right. She probably wrote her own movie. No, I'm just kidding.
Did you leave a 1-star review for this movie? I'm just curious.
I should have, because I felt deeply offended and hurt by it.
You're like, 1 star for writing the movie. That's all.
That's it.
I had higher hopes than this. That's my review.
I think every book on Amazon should definitely just at least minimum 2 stars. Like, 2 stars because you did the thing, at least. You know, like, you did it.
You finished.
Valiant effort, because that's like 300 pages something.
Yeah.
Totally.
That portrayal is really interesting, too, that, the sort of ideal life or system as a writer is just sit around and wait for inspiration to show up, and that's all, and it's not hard work, and when it happens, it's like the tap is turned on, and when it doesn't happen, you're just disgruntled and waiting. Like, I feel like that neglects to mention all of the reward that comes with the discipline.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, how often do you make yourself sit down in the morning and 5 minutes into writing some crappy words, you're like, yeah, I'm writing and it feels great. And if you had just been sitting around waiting for inspiration, you wouldn't have started.
Because when you're in it, you're glad you're doing it.
Yeah.
There will definitely always be writing sessions, I think, just in the way that there are workouts where it doesn't click. Like, it never clicks, but you get through it, you know? And it's like, if I was that girl's writing coach in that movie, I would have showed up and I would have been like, girl, you don't get to go ice skating today. You don't. Like, you don't get to go to the town square. Like, you're going to sit and you're going to write because, like, I think that that's one of the things of, like, you have to be willing to make sacrifices for the things that you love. Like, you can't always go to the tree lighting, you know? Like, sometimes you gotta write. That's why I say get it done in the morning, because the tree lighting happens at night. Like,
I love it.
Fall in love in the evening, write your books in the morning. That's the motto.
Perfect.
I'm
going to put that on my calendar. I love that. And I love that you said you don't believe in writer's block. I read something just in the last couple weeks that I may get this totally wrong, but it was basically alluding to the fact that scientists are saying they think writer's block is actually just anxiety. It's like a form of that, and it's sort of natural in a way to feel that, and you got to kind of push through it, you know?
I believe that.
Yeah, not become a slave to it.
Yeah, it becomes a crutch. It becomes an excuse. Well, I have writer's block, and that's why I can't write right now, you know? And it's like all these things and excuses as to why we can't write right now. And it's like sometimes, like, you just have to sit there and you have to write words that are not perfect. And I think a lot of us are crippled by this idea that it has to be perfect in order for me to put it down on the page. But, like, to push through that feeling, because I mean, I used to be somebody who was like, well, I can't write until I have that perfect first line. And when I have the line, then everything else is going to show up. And it's like, but I wasted so much time where I could have been writing things that might become something else.
I love that.
Yeah. I'm thinking of us when we songwrite sometimes and we're like, oh, maybe we have one little idea, but it would be like sitting down and saying, well, I need to be able to write the first line of the first verse and I can't write anything else. But maybe what's in your heart is the bridge. But you can't do that because you have to sit down and write the first, you know, it's like, no, don't put those limitations on it. Just start and let it assemble itself in whatever order it needs to.
Yeah, it doesn't have to come in order.
It rarely does.
So with all the amazing things you've got going on, is there something you're pursuing in your life right now that feels scary to you?
Yeah, we're buying a home. That's not fun. It's scary.
Ooh, tell us about that.
Let me just tell you everything. No, so
tell us everything.
I've never bought a home before in my life. My husband bought the home before we were together, so I didn't have to deal with any of that. And I mean, in the movies that I watch, like the Hallmark movies, the husband just surprises the wife with a home. It's like, here is our home.
Right.
It doesn't happen. He's making them participate. It's awful. So we've bought the home. Like, we have the home. We've gone through all the steps. But we have, like, one of those, like, contingency plans where it's, like, our home has to sell in a certain amount of time for us to have this home. And that's scary because all we're doing right now is waiting. Like, we are just waiting and basically living in a Macy's storefront because everything is staged and, like, waiting for people to come and look at it. So at any moment, it's like, oh, you have to leave in the next 10 minutes. They're coming. Like, it's like we're kind of actively living in this limbo. And I think that's, like, what is really scary for me is that it's like, this might not work out. Like, this home that we thought was our home may not be our home. And, like, I would love for everything to work out. And I believe somebody is going to buy a home for Christmas and, like, it's going to be our home. But, like, the scary thing is putting yourself out on the limb and doing the things even when you don't know what the outcome is going to be. And, like, it's so, yeah, oof, man.
Yeah.
I have been, like, writing every single day about it because I'm like, I'm going to want to remember these feelings when I come out of this thing. Because right now it's like, yeah, maybe I'm waiting on a home, but, like, I feel like I am channeling, like, me when I am 25 and I am thinking I am going to be forever alone. And, like, where is that guy that I'm meant to date and marry? And it's like, it's the same exact thing of, like, you're waiting for something and you don't know what the outcome is going to be. And, like, sometimes all you can do is just wait. And, like, how do you wait in the best way possible? Whew.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I think it's interesting that you said you are gonna want to remember this feeling later. There's such great utility in that because your perspective right now is so shaped by your feelings. This is like a totally different lens that I'm gonna have later when whatever's gonna happen has already happened.
Well, you know what I heard was, you know, it's going to work out. It's like you're already saying, this is going to work out.
Yeah.
And when it does, I've got to remember how scary this felt. And I wasn't sure.
Oh, totally.
Experiencing those feelings and having that belief at the same time.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing.
When I experienced depression for the first time while I was, like, living in New York City, I remember walking out of that, and then I get this book deal to write this book, and I go back to my diaries, and I literally didn't have a credible thing to my name. I literally just had a bunch of feelings. It was like, I feel sad, I feel hopeless, I feel that, I feel this. And I made a promise to myself I was never going to do that again. Like, I was never going to, like, walk through these situations and all that I ever stopped to comment on it was, I feel sad, or I feel like this is never ending. And so now I'm like, I force myself to write through hard things. But I think the other thing is that it's like, I mean, I'm definitely somebody who does everything for the story. Like, you give me something outlandish and I'm like, I will do that thing because there's a story in there, you know, like there's a bigger meaning to that. So, like, the other day my mom calls me and she goes, well, your home hasn't sold yet because, well, so just a little backstory now that everybody can just have everything of me. Our home, we were told by everyone this thing is going to sell in like 2 days. Mm-hmm. Every home around us has sold in under 2 weeks. And we have had the home on the market 26 days. 26 days is not a long time, but for us, it feels kind of like an eternity. And so my mom calls me and she's like, you know, you need to order this. You need to go to a Catholic bookstore somewhere in Atlanta and you need to get this little saint. His name is Saint Joseph. And he is the patron saint of home selling. And so she's like, you need to bury him in your front yard and your home is going to sell. And my mom is not Catholic, like, at all. So, like, she said that my aunt did this. And she was kind of joking with me, but I Amazon primed that-ish, like, real quick. And
this is the thing.
Joe,
I mean, just in case. What could it hurt?
he showed up. And I, like, take that thing out and I buried it in the ground like 2 days ago. And what was so crazy and so funny to me was that it's like we hadn't had a showing in a week and a half and we were all kind of like, what's going on? And then all of a sudden yesterday, St. Joe brings along 3 showings in one day and has already lined up 3 more for the rest of this week.
What?
And I just was like, oh, it's St. Joe, you know? And my mom is like, please, no, like that's not where I was trying to get you. But as I was reflecting on St. Joe yesterday, like, I was just thinking about it, and I was like, okay, but, like, what this really symbolizes is that, like, there's still a little bit of hope. When everything around you might look hopeless, or it might look like we don't have an explanation for why this is happening, you get this little trinket, and you bury it in the ground, and it's kind of a symbol to the world of, like, I'm still hoping. I'm holding out hope that this thing is going to happen. And I think that is one of, like, the most important roles of somebody who is a writer or a creator, is that if we cannot instill hope in other people, like, what is the point? And there are definitely some people that are not meant to instill hope in other people. Like Stephen King, like there's not much hope in what he's writing, and that he's brilliant in it. But I know for me, like, I need to remember these moments where I felt a little bit hopeless, but I've also been like, okay, but like there was still a reason to hang on and hold on. And like, I do it all for the story. So like one day I'm going to dig St. Joe up and I'm going to be like, it was all you, buddy. It was you.
I love it. It's what you guys were talking about earlier. When you wake up one day and it doesn't feel like it's working out, you can't just quit. You can't just take your house off the market. You know, you got to stick it out. Like that's just another example.
Totally. And doing something like that, even if you're not Catholic, right? It's like, it's an act of faith. It represents something.
Yes, it represents something.
Also feels really good to do something when there's so much out of your control. You're
I
like,
know.
Even though I'm not Catholic, I can do something and I can still have faith. Like, that's really important.
Exactly. I think for the amount of people that are like, oh, like in my realm of like faith, it's like, let go and let God. And you're like, well, I've let go 77 times today. So like, I need something physical. I got to bury something in the dirt. It's like when people go through a breakup and they burn the love letters and they like burn everything down. It's like something physical to try to deal with these things inside of you that you can't really touch, but you know that they're there.
I love it.
Yeah.
We're going to put a link to St. Joseph on Amazon Prime in our show notes.
Yes.
If anybody else needs him. Yes. I might just get him for my desk.
They say the reason that they bury him upside down is to torment him into selling your home and making it profitable. So he knows he gets to come out of the ground when the home is sold. So he works extra hard.
So he's making it happen.
I wonder what he wants to do once he comes out of the ground. Yeah. What are his goals?
Well, I'm going to take him out to dinner. Like, Joe's coming to dinner. I, like, have been calling my mom. Every time we've gotten a showing, I've called my mom, and I've pretended to be Joe on the other side of the phone. I've been like, hello, I want to get out of the ground. Please let me out.
That's awesome.
Joe, we're going to celebrate when this house sells.
We are going to celebrate.
Oh.
And that is scary.
He's getting a 4-course meal.
I feel like you have told us so many incredible things, so many encouraging things, and I really appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to share so much of yourself and your own story. We love it. We love it.
It's been so fun.
Well, we always ask this, and I'm so curious because you've already dropped so much knowledge on us today, but I'm wondering what you would say to somebody specifically to encourage them if they're just starting to do their scary thing or even just thinking about it, or maybe they're in the middle of it, wherever they are. But what would you say to someone else who's sort of actively pursuing something that scares them?
What I would tell them and probably tell myself is that it's like, okay, like instead of looking at the bigger picture, which can be incredibly daunting, just do the next thing, whatever the next thing is, because it's probably guaranteed to be a pretty small act, you know? And so, like, you can do that thing, and then you can do the next thing, and then you can do the next thing. And, like, soon enough, without even realizing it, you'll have done some pretty big things. But I think it's, like, looking at what it's all meant to be, like, the bigger picture is just terribly scary, you know? Like, that's why I think, like, when I stepped into this home buying process, I thought to myself, like, we can't buy a home. Like, we can't buy a home. And, like, my husband was like, he works for a home building company. He knows everything about home ownership. And yet, like, we didn't have a conversation about how, in my mind, the thought of it just seemed way too scary. But, like, when it actually started happening, I was like, wait, what? It works that way? Like, wait, what? We put an offer and they said yes? And, like, where are all the hurdles that I placed in my mind, you know? And, like, I think it's one of those things where it's like, don't be so quick to say, I can't do blank because of what you perceive it's going to be like, because your experience is going to be different than somebody else's experience. But, like, it is all going to add up to a bunch of small things on repeat.
I love that.
Love it. Yeah. I love that too. I think that's interesting too, you know, all the phantom barriers we put up, right? It's like, what do you actually know? And what are you making an educated guess about? And what are you straight up making an assumption about? Sometimes all those things look or feel the same, and it can be helpful to parse them out and go, okay, this is what I actually know.
Because so many things are like what you're going to do, like what happens if this doesn't work out in 5 years from now? And it's like, well, like we don't we don't know because we don't get 5 years right now. Like, we have today, we may have tomorrow. That would be really great. But, like, I think, like, we have to stop making fear-driven decisions based on, will this work out 5 years from now? There are definitely some things that you should think about for 5 years from now, you know, like some people that you shouldn't date anymore and like some jobs that you need to get out of. But like, we can't not buy a home because we're afraid, oh gosh, like what if in 2 years you lose your job or like I'm not making the same amount of income? Like, there's no way for us to know those things. And so you kind of have to go forth, and that's where that faith and that hope comes in.
I think you said it too. The kicker is don't make fear-driven decisions.
Yeah.
You know, about 5 years from now. You can drive those decisions with a lot of other things and still have 5 years from now in mind, but fear is not a helpful one. So don't use it.
Amen.
I love it.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for taking so much time with us today. Where can people find you? Where can they read your books?
You can find me all things Hannah Brencher, hannahbrencher.com, and all my social media handles are Hannah Brencher. And books in bookstores, wherever books are sold, Amazon, Prime It. If you want to like throw me and Joe in your cart, we'll show up tomorrow.
Together.
Awesome.
Together.
Better together.
I can't think of anything better.
Sell a home and change a life.
That's right. Can you just tell us real quick the names of your books?
The names are If You Find This Letter, and then the one that came out just a few months ago is called Come Matter Here.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much.
Thank you. This has been so fun.
It has been so fun.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard, please take a second to share it with a friend. There's tons more info about today's show in the show notes, as well as a link to listen to our music on Spotify. Thanks, friends. See you next week.
Listen, we have a lot up our sleeves.
I love
100%.
that.